So in 2017, I went on a mission trip to Guatemala. Victoria and I were dating at the time, and she had told me all these stories about how amazing her mission trips were. Because at that point in her life, these mission trips were a big part of her life. She had gone a dozen times at that point, and she told me how serving the underprivileged people who lived in Guatemala allowed her to see and to experience the love of God in a way that she just hadn't before. And I wanted to experience that. Especially, I was a new believer. I wasn't really sure what it meant to serve people, and I really wanted to experience that for myself and to witness it firsthand. So I saved up the money, got my passport, got on a plane, flew to Guatemala, and when we got there, I got to meet some really cool people and serve in some fun ways. I got to serve in a medical clinic there where we treated people with their various illnesses. But there's one day that I'll never forget. And that's the day that we went to visit the landfill. Now, this landfill was huge, and it was all of the waste from all these villages went there. And when the door of the bus opened up, when we stepped outside, immediately the smell was overwhelming. It was so bad. It was just this garbage just baking in the hot Guatemalan sun. They had garbage fires in the dump that put up this smoke that immediately just burned your eyes and made it hard to breathe. And we were there because families lived at the dump. They had cobbled together these shacks and these homes, and they would go through the garbage to try to find food to eat or stuff that they could sell to make enough money to live, and we were there to give them a meal. This was really impactful to me, and so I took a picture. I took this picture. You can see in the background, this is a little shack that a family put together. You can see the smoke and just the garbage, and that really made an impact on me. But as I was taking the picture, someone came running up to me, and they said, "What are you doing?" It's I'm taking a picture. And they're "Yeah, but why are you taking a picture?" I was I don't know. I guess to remember the moment. I don't know. And they said, "Are you doing it so that you can post it later and people can think that you're a good person?" I was I don't know. I don't think so. That wasn't my plan. But that really started to affect me. I started to think about that. Is that why I went on this mission trip? Is that why I was serving? Because I wanted people to look at me like I was something special, like I was a good person, that I wanted them to have a different perspective of me. And so when I got back to the States, I was really slow to share pictures with people because I didn't want them to think that I thought I was somebody. And when my coworkers asked me about the trip, I was uncomfortable to talk about it. They said, what where were you? Why did you go to Guatemala? And I was oh, me and some people just went down there to, help out. And they're yeah, but why? And instead of using that as an opportunity to say something maybe about Jesus or about God, I was we just wanted to do some good and help out. And the conversation got so awkward and just totally died there. I missed this great opportunity to talk about God with people who don't normally get the opportunity to talk about God. And I think that's a tension that we can all experience. We want to do good, but we don't want people to look at us we think that we're good. We want to do good things, but we don't want people to look at us and think that we're trying to be something special. We don't want to stand out. We don't want to be goody two-shoes, think that we're too good for other people. We don't want to talk about the things that we're doing because other people are going to feel like we're judging them, and it gets really confusing and mixed up, and then it's what do we do? And so either we just don't talk about it, or we don't do anything good because we just feel so twisted up inside. Or maybe we think that there's something special and something extra special, holy about serving in ways that other people can't see. We think that there's something special about serving in ways that people can't see. What we're going to learn today is that actually, God says it's exactly the opposite. We've been in our series, Habits of the Heart, where we're looking at everyday habits that will help us to grow closer to God. We started with prayer, we looked at Bible reading and worship, and today we're doing service. We're looking at the everyday habit of service. How can you serve people in your everyday life that is going to help you grow closer to Jesus? Our big idea today is going to be to do good and celebrate God. That we need to do good and celebrate God. We're going to be in Matthew chapter 5, and a little bit of context before we jump in. Jesus has been traveling around Galilee. He's been preaching the gospel, he's been teaching in synagogues, and he's been performing a lot of miracles. And these are like incredible miracles. He's been healing people that have been suffering from excruciating pain. He's bringing relief. People that have been paralyzed are now walking again with strength. People who have all kinds of diseases and sicknesses and illnesses are being cured because of the miracles that Jesus is doing. So people are bringing people to see Jesus. There are crowds of people following Jesus. And at one point, he decides to climb up a mountain and to address the people, to address the crowds. History is going to remember this as the Sermon on the Mount. That's what we're going to be looking at today, and specifically in our passage, Jesus is addressing his disciples. So he's talking to people who have a relationship with him, who are following him, and he's telling them how they should live. So we are in Matthew chapter 5, beginning in verse 14. Jesus says, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden." He tells his disciples that they are the light of the world, but he also compares them to a city that is set on a hill and it cannot be hidden. What's he talking about? Well, have you ever driven into a big city, like New York City or Boston or even think Albany, and it's nighttime and you see it on the horizon and you can just see the lights? You can see it from a long way off. And you can just see the city. It can't be hidden. It's this prominent thing. Well, back in Jesus' time, they didn't have electricity. They didn't have lights like we do, but they did have something called white limestone. White limestone is what they used to build their homes in the Middle East back then. Here's a picture of what it looks like today. This is in modern-day Jerusalem. It's this white limestone. Now, it was so bright white that in the sun, it would reflect the sun's light, and it would be radiant. You could see it for miles and miles away in the desert. And at nighttime, it would reflect the light of the moon, and you could see it for miles and miles away in the desert. Here's an artist's recreation of what the Temple of Herod looked like in Jesus' day. Imagine that glowing in the sun in the middle of the desert. And it's not just the temples that were made of this. In fact, the Egyptians also understood this. In fact, the Great Pyramids originally had white limestone on the outside of them. As time has gone on, it's fallen off, but originally they were covered in this white limestone so that people for miles and miles away would see the light radiating from the city. So when Jesus compares his disciples to a city on a hill that cannot be hidden, he's making a cultural reference that everybody would have understood. Now notice, this is so important. He says that his disciples are the light of the world. And I think when I've read this passage before, I've pictured like a lighthouse, right? Like it's a lighthouse that turns on a light and casts it into the sea, into the darkness. But that's not really what Jesus is saying, because a lighthouse is just a dark tower unless the light is turned on. He's not saying to turn on the light. He's not saying that we need to try to be a light. He's saying that you are a light. When Jesus says that we are light, he's talking about our identity. It's not something that we do, it's who we are. Because when we believe in Jesus, something incredible happens. And we look the same on the outside, but something amazing has happened on the inside. When we say Jesus, it's not about us anymore, it's about you, and we give our life to him. The biblical authors compare it to from going from death to life. From being creatures of darkness to being creatures of light. When we believe in Jesus, an incredible transformation happens where we have hope and life and a new purpose and a new destiny. We have a new way of living. It's this incredible transformation where we go from being darkness to being people of light because Jesus is the ultimate light. And so when he tells us that we are the light of the world, we are like a city set on a hill, we are reflecting the light of God. Now, what does that mean? Light is a very prominent theme in the Bible. If you're reading a word every day in your Bible, chances are you'll probably hit the word light once or twice. And in Scripture, it's a picture of all of the characteristics of God. Like light is equal to God, and the absence of God is equal to darkness. So the light that Jesus is talking about is all of the characteristics of God. The love, the joy, the peace, the patience, the kindness, the faithfulness, the goodness, and the self-control, all of the aspects of God. But also, this is so important, he's drawing a comparison between light and darkness, life and death, between truth and lies, between hope and despair, between presence and absence, between purity and filth, between chaos and order. All of the things that make God up who we are, of who he is who we are when we believe in him. We reflect his goodness to the people around us. We radiate it out. It's not something that we have to try to do. It's who he makes us to be. It's who we are. And this light that radiates to people, it's a blessing to everyone. Look at how he continues. Jesus says, "Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand. And it gives light to all in the house." Back in Jesus' time, when the sun went down, there was no more light. They didn't have street lights, they didn't have phones, they didn't have flashlights. They had two sources, the moon and fire. And so in your home, you would have a small oil lamp that you would light, and it would not be like lights like this. It would be like just enough light to be able to see the people in the room. When I was a kid, we lived in Texas, and we had like really bad storms. Like we had like tornado watch level storms where like the wind would be blowing, the house would be shaking, lightning would be flashing, thunder would be booming. And as a kid, I was so scared. And sometimes the lights would go out. And when the lights went out, I would be shaking. I would be so terrified. And I remember my dad would get like this old like battery-powered lantern, and he would turn it on, and he would put it on the mantle. And it was like just enough light that we could see each other. And when I was a kid, as soon as that light was turned on, I was able to feel safe again. Nothing had changed. The darkness was still there. The house was still shaking. The lightning was still flashing. But that little light was enough to give me peace and comfort. And that's what Jesus is saying that we ought to be. We ought to be that light in the dark world, to give peace and comfort and hope to people. Because the world is dark. I don't have to tell you that. The world is broken. There's so much hurt and pain and death and betrayal. The brokenness in the world oftentimes comes out as people hurting us, letting us down. And if you're here today, maybe that's like where you're at. Maybe you are very well acquainted with how dark the world is. Maybe you're experiencing that right now. My encouragement to you is that God is not surprised by that. And he says that Jesus is the light of the world. And there really is no other light. He is the hope. And Jesus doesn't slap on a new coat of paint onto things that are broken, but he makes them new again. Jesus is the hope. And we, as people who follow Jesus, ought to be also giving people hope. And just like my dad wouldn't take that little lantern and throw a blanket or hide it under a basket, we ought not to hide our light. We ought not to hide our light, but instead, we need to let our light shine before other people. Please notice this. This is so important. Look at how it says that we need to let our light shine. It doesn't say that we need to turn it on. It doesn't say that we need to try really hard to make it brighter. It's like Jesus is saying, guys, just be who I made you to be. Get out of your own way. Let your light shine before other people. Other people ought to see your love and your joy and your peace and your kindness. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to go through hardship, but it means that you're navigating it in such a way that it reflects who God is. Let your light shine before others. The implication here is that there is something that we can do to not let our light shine. The implication is that there's something that we can do to keep our light from shining. I think there are several things that we can do that might cause that, but the one that Jesus is talking about specifically is that we need to not hide your light in holy huddles. Jesus is directly addressing the religious people at that time. These Pharisees, these teachers of the law, they would hide in their synagogues and in their temples, and they would look out and they would judge people who didn't know God like they did. Instead of going out and giving people hope, they would stick together and judge everybody else. It's like if you go in a closet and the rest of the house is dark, but you've got all the lights on in the closet. Like, how beneficial is that? Jesus is saying we need to let our light shine before others. We need to bring our light out into where it's needed. The same danger is true for us today. It can be really easy for us to hide in our own holy huddles at church on a Sunday morning, in our Bible studies, in our comfort zone. And guys, I get it. Like, it's way easier to hang out with people who believe what you believe. It might be more enjoyable. It's definitely more comfortable. But Jesus doesn't call us to comfort. He says to let your light shine before others, to put it up high, not hide it in a corner, not put it under a basket, but to let other people to see. You know, when the room is pitch black, you're able to see the smallest light. Like the tiniest little light you can see when the room is pitch black. So if you feel like, man, I just don't feel like I'm making a difference, can I tell you, if you're in the right place, you are. People are going to notice it. People are going to see. We do this so that people may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. People need to see our good works as we be who God made us to be, as we live our life, as we go out of our way to help people. People are going to notice. It's like if you're at a restaurant and you like see somebody else eating something and you're like, that looks really good. Like, that looks delicious. I want what he's got. And Jesus is saying that's what's going to happen if we're living our life in front of other people. And here's the thing, guys. People may still think you're crazy for believing in God. They might still think that you're ignorant for believing in miracles. They might still lump you in with all of the other stereotypes that they see about Christians, all of the people that have hurt them in their past who said they were Christians. But there is an undeniable reality that if you are being who God made you to be, if you are reflecting His character by the way that you love people, by the way that you live your life, and by the way that you serve others, people are going to look at you and they're going to go, something is different about this person. I don't know what it is, but there's something different. And they might just go, maybe there's something to this Jesus guy after all. We have to let our good works be seen by other people. And when people ask us, why are we like that? Why are we kind? Why are we generous? Why do we love people? Why do we go through hardship and we're not destroyed? Why do we have hope? That's our opportunity to give glory to God. Now, glory is one of those words that's like, it's a Christian word, but it's like, how do we do that this week? There are lots of different ways to translate the word glory. Extol, praise, honor. But I think the one that's probably most like relevant, the one that we can most connect with is the word celebrate. Jesus is telling us that when people say, "Why are you like that?" we go, "It's because God is so good." And we talk about Him. We go on mission trips not so that we can look good, but we're like, look how good God is. We are kind to people and patient with people, not so people can think that we're good, but so that we can talk about how good that God is. When people look at you and what you're doing, are they celebrating you or are they celebrating God? You know, the enemy would love us to be so twisted up and so stuck up in our own head about what we're doing and our own motivations and is this good enough, and that we end up doing nothing. God tells us very clearly, lift up your light, let it be seen, and give God all of the celebration. We need to do good and celebrate God. We need to do good by being who God made us to be, by being kind, by being gentle, by being like Him. And we need to celebrate Him when people ask us. Because here's the thing. When we let our light shine, we are not bringing attention to us. We're making God known. Our good works ought to be one of the loudest witnesses to people who don't know Him yet. Use that as an opportunity to give Him the credit and to talk about Him. You know, there are so many ways that we can do good that it can feel overwhelming. And I think sometimes we think we got to do big things. Like we got to go on mission trips, we got to serve in soup kitchens. But let me tell you this. There's only one thing that I want everyone to focus on. I want you to focus on doing ordinary, everyday good. Just ordinary, plain, simple good. Behind the scenes good. Just the ordinary stuff. And that's the kind of stuff that changes lives. Just when you go out of your way for somebody. Just when you listen to somebody when you don't have to. I mean, maybe this week we can try to appreciate people more. Instead of just saying thank you for what they do for us, we say thank you for who they are. Bonus points if you do that with somebody who is not easy to like. That's a way to let your light shine and point back to God. Maybe we got to be generous, like buying people's coffee or lunch, or maybe there's someone that you work with who's got kids that could really use a date night. Maybe bless them. Maybe have a line item in your budget for spontaneous generosity. Maybe you just listen to people. I mean, in today's day and age, we are so busy and so distracted that putting your phone down and just listening and asking questions can be a real gift. And then actually praying for them and following up can open up incredible doors for Jesus. You know, here's the thing. You know, Fireside Church, I'm going to be real for a second. Like, you guys do this well. Like you are coming to a church plant at a senior center. Like, you're here because you get the mission. You get that, we need to be the light of the world. We are the light of the world. You understand the importance of people meeting Jesus. You serve multiple times a month. You're generous. You're in the community. You're doing life together in a part of groups. You guys do so well at this. I just want to remind you of one thing. That your neighbors, your coworkers, the community, they don't think about Christians at all. And if they do, what they think about them is not good. They have a picture of somebody who's a hypocrite, who's judgmental, who's ignorant, who's hateful. And that's so devastating because nothing could be farther away from the heart of Jesus. But when we let our light shine before other people, and when we do good and we give God the credit, we can be the ambassadors of Jesus to people. That is an incredibly strong power, and the great thing is that we don't have to overcomplicate it. We can do it in simple, ordinary, everyday ways, being the people that God made us to be. Let's do good and celebrate God together.